Since the initial full trailer reveal of 007 First Light at the start of June 2025, nearly 5 years since the game was initially announced, there have been relatively scant details about what players can actually expect from the gameplay itself. Despite developer and publisher IO Interactive hitting the social media hype train hard, so hard that even a 007 piloted tank would scarcely slow this thing down. There was of course the announcement that Mads Mikkelsen would be reprising his role as Le Chiffre for a special mission in Hitman World of Assassination. There's a bunch of wishlist milestone rewards encouraging players to sign up in order to unlock skins and gadgets and such for First Light, snippets of behind the scenes interviews with the crew, and it all felt like this was building up to the game's world premiere exclusive presentation at Gamescom. It felt like surely that would be the event where we would finally see some in-depth gameplay and hear from journalists who would be amongst the first in the world to actually play the game and then relay their thoughts to us, all patiently waiting by our computers for the news to drop. Speak to me! Well, if you were anything like me, you probably ended the Gamescom week somewhat disappointed that pretty much nothing was revealed, no matter how many times I frantically refreshed the various social media pages.
It has not been perfected out of years of patient research entirely for that purpose, 007.
Well, patience is indeed a virtue and all that, as finally, on September 3rd, 2025, we were treated to a full-on 30 minutes plus of First Light gameplay as part of a PlayStation State of Play, and it looks like they're recreating the Moonraker freefall action sequence, so if I wasn't already fully on board with this thing, I am now. And even if they weren't homaging one of my favourite James Bond movies, based on what we've seen so far, I am not only on board that Aston Martin DBS, I am fighting for the wheel of the thing, because I am really loving what we've seen so far. Please nobody try contacting me from the end of March next year until well into April, because I am clearing my schedule for this thing. I really was not expecting this to be a full-on playthrough of much of what, well, they say Bond's first mission as a recruit, rather than the first level of the game itself. I do assume that there will be some initial training or the like to start things off. We've seen clips in trailers previously to indicate that Bond is indeed at some kind of training camp, I guess. So, story-wise, Bond seems to be starting off at a real, low rank here. He's posing as a chauffeur for two other people, and he's dropping them off at some kind of swanky event, and then, of course, he sees something suspicious, which prompts him to do some investigating. I was very much getting flashbacks to one of my very favourite Bond video game levels of all time, and one of my very favourite Bond games, Nightfire, specifically The Exchange, where that level sees you infiltrating a fancy party. Then the narrative seems to skip forward a bit. Bond is pretty dusted up, and he's met a maid, and it sounds like from the dialogue that she's a fellow agent from a different agency, so presumably there's a bit of action inside the building that I guess is just not ready to show yet. But yeah, then it's next into a driving segment with the mission of pursuing 009, so we're gonna have a rogue agent for Bond to chase down, which is pretty cool, and I'm thrilled that the game includes driving levels. I think they should be an absolute staple of Bond games, though they're not always an absolute guarantee, and the Aston Martin gets nice and busted up. Presumably there are going to be different ways to go about this mission too. We see Bond driving through fields and off-road, and then this is further followed by a great display of all-out action as Bond tries to catch the plane. The action looks really great here. Some of the mechanics are relatively familiar. Takedowns, covering system, and then there's some kind of slow down Bond sense system. I know I wasn't alone in being worried that some of the action would potentially be neutered given some of the Eon production revelations about how they didn't like Bond killing in the games and such, and well, I mean, it's definitely not going to be a problem here. That being said, it seems like the ability to actually kill bad guys has to be initiated by the game.
Sometimes James will need more than his fists to get out alive. When enemies show clear intent to shoot and kill Bond, you will be granted a license to kill.
Which, if so, kind of feels like some kind of compromise, maybe to keep Eon happy, but it could slightly take away from the idea that it's a free-for-all regarding strategy and routes and so on if you only have access to deadly weapons when the game allows it. Though, I mean, we'll see how it plays, because the action here is audacious and very Bond. The explosions look incredible, and I am loving what we are seeing so far. And then the playthrough segment ends with this proper Moonraker homage homage with Bond in freefall. He's having to get a parachute. I am absolutely thrilled. I really hope that this was a conscious... I know that the IO Interactive have been judiciously studying the Bond films and whatnot, and putting a lot of care and attention into making sure that this feels like an authentic Bondian experience. So I don't think that it's an accident that we have some Moonraker recreation here, and I'm very, very thrilled to see it. I think the graphics look absolutely amazing. Something I've been very impressed with about Hitman World of Assassination so far. If you're a long-term follower of this channel, you'll know that I have only really just started getting into Hitman now, but the cinematic texture to that game is something that I've been very excited about since, obviously, knowing that IO Interactive are the same publisher, they're going to be releasing the Bond game, so seeing that cinematic element transfer over to the world of Bond is something that I am very, very excited about. But overall, just the detail of the environment, it just looks so lovely. It's a lived-in world, all of these workers going about their business, the whole thing looks super cinematic, and this is probably still a work in progress, so the final product will presumably look even better. There were some frame rate issues during the playthrough, which will hopefully be rectified, particularly towards the end when the plane was blowing up and stuff. It did kind of, the frame rate dropped quite a bit. I don't know, maybe this was just the live stream, or maybe it is just because this is an earlier version of the level that is being played through for the purposes of this, but I certainly hope that they are going to be rectified by the time the game hits the shelves. There are some really interesting gameplay mechanics that I'm really keen to have a hands-on experience with. Like, I really do like all of the options of, like, how to talk to people, and then obviously you can take different routes, and just like in Hitman, you gotta break cover if you do certain things in front of onlookers, you need to create distractions to get into places and such. But the bluff mechanic seems very interesting. I can't say that I've ever played a game with something similar, so let me know in the comments below if you know of a game with such a mechanic. But yeah, I mean, bluffing his way through things is kinda, it's a very classic Bond thing. Like, yeah, he is often thinking of his feet. Yes, he is rolling with the punches as Klaus Hergesheimer in Diamonds Are Forever, for instance. So the idea of taking that skill and putting it into a game is something that I think is really cool, and something that I don't think we've ever really seen in a Bond game before, or at least I'm racking my brain to think of an instance where you choose to bluff your way through a certain situation. I'm gonna have so much fun just taking the most chaotic options possible and seeing how things go. I do think that the replay value for this is going to be immense. Much like in Hitman, where you can replay levels in multiple different ways, I think that this game is going to have a lot of that same quality, despite First Light. So far from what we've seen and heard about it, I think it's going to be a far more narrative experience than Hitman is, but still, the fact that it has all of this flexibility regarding how you go about objectives and stuff, I think it's looking really cool. And hey, we have gadgets, which is really exciting. There's this Q-Lab HUD in the bottom left, and there's darts, there's smoke bombs. This is really cool. Again, I do think that gadgets should be like a prerequisite sort of expectation for Bond games, but with the last batch of Craig-era games, they weren't always necessarily a guarantee. It felt like you were just using the smartphone to get into places, and that was kind of it, whereas here it's cool to see, like, actual projectiles and that kind of thing. I'm glad that they're going to be making good use of Q in this story. And quips! I mean, yeah, the dialogue that we've heard so far throughout this, it does feel authentically Bondian.
What?
Ken Banks, penetration tester. I need to have a stern word with your manager.
Good to have you on the team.
Which again is something that's just really nice to see. I do think that they are going to have to work overtime a bit on getting this character, because he looks so much younger than any Bond that we've previously had, and so different from, I think, any Bond we've previously had. I do think that they're going to be trying to win over the skeptics quite early on by giving him a good bunch of, well, Bond moments, for lack of a better term. And yeah, hey, they even had the actor Patrick Gibson there to say a few words and announce much of the rest of the main cast, which was really cool. I was interested to see Priyanka Burford is confirmed as M. I had speculated based on the previous trailer whether that was her or not, and I believe that this is the first time it's been officially confirmed, which I only point out because Priyanka Burford had a small part in No Time to Die as one of the lab technicians you see early on in the film. So this is quite a bump up in terms of role for her to be M. I was really enjoying the music too, just the overall Bondian flourishes throughout I thought were really, really lovely. Again, I think presentation-wise, based on this, it's like, oh wow, okay, yeah, this is gonna feel like you are playing through a James Bond movie. Following up the raw gameplay footage, there was a segment with some narration talking through the mechanics over clips of what I assume is a different level, which I thought was really nice. There are lots of Hitman mechanics here, like eavesdropping into conversations and multiple routes to achieving your objective and so on. You can go in stealthy or like a bull in a china shop. I think it is going to be interesting when the game comes out, like how much of an expectation there is on the game maker's part for players to replay levels. Like I say, this is something that with Hitman it took me a little bit of time to kind of get my head around that, to be perfectly honest. Like, I'm used to just, you know, I go back and I replay games, but I am kind of used to, okay, I start a level, I move on to the next level, and then I continue on through the game, and maybe I'll replay something if I really enjoy it, or if I am after a particular collectible or whatnot, and particularly if it's a narrative-driven game, like I presume First Light is going to be, I kind of want to move forward, I want to get to the next bit of the story. But yeah, as I say, like, with Hitman, I can just finish a level and then go right back into it and do it again a completely different way, and I do wonder how much of that expectation is going to be here in First Light, or indeed, if it is going to be so narrative-driven that the gameplay itself lasts a good long while, and then replaying it is more of just a thing that just diehard fans are gonna do. I don't know, I'll be curious to see how that all plays out. And then of course the trailer ended with the announcement of the release date for the game, March 27th, 2026. So I know what I'm gonna be doing next Easter. But yeah, it was always gonna be interesting, like, how close to the next Grand Theft Auto is it gonna potentially be? Because obviously I think GTA 6 is gonna be like the biggest game of the year next year, and anything that comes out in the weeks and indeed months after that game is probably going to really struggle to get a footing, so I'm happy to hear that First Light is going to be coming ahead of all that storm. So yes, if you haven't already gathered from this, my first impressions based on this gameplay that we've seen so far, it really, really good. I am very impressed by the cinematic quality of it. I think there's some really interesting mechanics in here that we've not seen in a Bond game previously, along with some familiar stuff. Like I say, the combat system looks very, like, yeah, you know, hiding around corners and ducking and combat and all that kind of stuff, so I'm fine with that, and the whole bluffing thing I'm very interested to play through, but mostly I'm just excited about this feeling like, yeah, you're playing through a cinematic Bond adventure, and Bond is there making quips and stuff. I think it's really exciting so far, and I am very much looking forward to seeing more. Who knows how much more we'll see prior to March. I'm guessing that there's going to be an extra trailer or two for us to dissect and talk about, but yeah, first impressions from me are very, very good. So there you go, those are my initial thoughts based on the playthrough that we've seen so far. Do let me know your own thoughts on this in the comment section below. As I've said, if I did have to list some negatives, the frame rates looked like it could have been a bit of an issue during one of the major action sequences, and I really hope that that's going to be cleared up by the time the game actually releases. And also the whole license to kill thing, like the idea that you can't actually kill anyone in the game until that pops up. Like, I mean, first of all, I do kind of love that, you know, license to kill, it's such part of the lexicon of James Bond in general, so I'm happy that that phrase is in there, but yeah, I do wonder if that could hamper some of the sense of freedom in certain places if you're basically waiting for the moment when you can get the Walther PPK out. But those are kind of minor quibbles, really, because I am, as I say, very excited about what we've seen so far. Let me know your own thoughts in the comment section below, and also if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do consider scrolling below and clicking the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button to stay up to date on future video uploads. I'm sure we're going to have more First Light stuff to talk about before the game is actually released, so do subscribe to stay up to date. And with all that being said, until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.